Hi everybody, I'm Tom Franklin and I'm glad to be here. I want to thank Chris for inviting the Academy back. We love this conference, we love this place, and it's good to get to be friends with some of you. And this is a beautiful place. It's really hot here. It seems hotter here than in most places. Last year was hot, this year is hot. And I also have to say that the camera last year that captured me, apparently there's a long YouTube video that was this conference last year that my brother watched. He got an iPad. My brother's a mechanic, and it made me cringe and die inside to imagine him watching me up here, full of the shit that I'm full of. He knows me from way back, and so he would have known the people I was talking about. So it really scares me, and also it occurs to me I'm wearing exactly the same thing. Except that my jeans I think are different. So what I hope is that if this one winds up on YouTube, people will think it's the same one. I've got a good long stretch of time today, and I want to use most of it. I want to do two things. The title of my lecture, I think it's Crippled Orphans at Christmas, Avoiding Sentimentality in Fiction. And I'm going to do, we're going to read three short stories together. They're in your handout, so I don't want you to look at the handout yet. Don't keep ahead. That's not allowed. And I'll say that on the front of it, it's just something that I give to all my beginning classes and my graduate classes. It's Kurt Vonnegut's Creative Writing 101. It's just 8 little bullet points that Vonnegut says that's all you need to know for creative writing, and they're all really good. One of them is make sure every character wants something, even if it's only a glass of water. That's really important. And do not write so that you won't waste the time of the reader. Just, I think, good, typical, just good general pointers about fiction writing. And it's from Kurt Vonnegut, so you have to listen to Kurt Vonnegut. I also use in my other classes Stephen King's book on writing. I really like that book. And he at one point says, adverbs are evil. Don't use adverbs. The ly verbs or the word very or just. You can always cut very. You can always cut just. Just a tip. And any ly word can be cut. And Stephen King makes this point, and I say, don't listen to me, listen to Stephen King. He's right. Adverbs are evil. Barry Hannah said adverbs are sissy. Okay? We're going to do 3 things. And if any of you saw my craft talk last year, I know at least Bill did. It's maybe a tiny bit of overlap, but not too much. But I also start out every class I do, be it graduate or beginners, with the 3 Ps. These are 3 things that every story needs. Every story needs its 3 Ps. You know what these are? You can't say that. You were here last year. Okay. Plot? No, really. It'll surprise you. Place, absolutely. What else? You got a place. What do you need for a story? It's a great place, but if somebody falls, if a tree falls, do they hear it? People. Yeah. So you got people in a place, and this is where plot comes from. How these people in this place negotiate what? The 3rd P? Problem. Beautiful. Thank you. So, everyone's about problem. So how the characters face their problem becomes the plot of your story. If you have Clint Eastwood walking into a gas station that's being held up, it's a very different story than if Woody Allen walks into a gas station that's being held up, right? They're 2 different stories, 2 different movies, okay, very different. The people and the problem, how they intersect, is the plot of a story. Now I also want to give you the 3 C's. This is character, context, conflict. So these are our fancy literary terms, okay? And then the fun ones are suckers in a situation. They got a situation, and they're in the shit. Okay? Same thing. One of Vonnegut's 8 rules is do terrible things to your characters so that we can see what they're made of. That's what we want. We want you to have these suckers in a situation in some shit. It's really fun. So think of that. Every story, every novel needs its 3 Ps. The P most often left out is the problem. What you often have is a character in a room, sometimes a bathtub, and they recline in the bathtub, and they're there for the whole length of the story, and they're thinking about stuff. And that is so boring. It's called a bathtub story. It can also be called a booth story. You sit in a booth at a diner or a bar, you sit at a bar, and nothing happens. People have to want something, and something has to keep them from getting it. That's your problem. Honestly, every character should want something, even if it's only a glass of water. Now, I want us to put this into effect here with our first little reading. Look past the Vonnegut, if you would, on your handout. This should be a very short story called The Wig. Everybody have this? Do I see it? If you came in late, you can still just listen to the book. I'm going to read this aloud. The Wig is a short story about Brady Udall. Anyone read Brady Udall? He did really well this past year with a novel called The Lonely Polygamist. Isn't that a great title? And his previous novel was 10 years before it was called The Miracle Life of Edgar Mint. And he has a collection of stories called Letting Loose the Hounds. In that story, it's just a remarkable little page-and-a-half story that he wrote in not very much time. So that's depressing. My 8-year-old son found a wig in the garbage dumpster this morning. I walked into the kitchen, highly irritated that I couldn't make a respectable knot in my green paisley tie. And there he was at the table, eating cereal and reading the funnies, the wig pulled tightly over his head like a football helmet. The wig was a dirty bush of curly blonde hair, the kind you might see on a prostitute or someone who was trying to imitate Marilyn Monroe. I asked him where he got the wig, and he told me, his mouth full of cereal. When I advised him that we don't wear things we find in the garbage, he simply continued eating and reading as if he didn't hear me. I wanted him to take that wig off, but I couldn't ask him to do it. I forgot all about my tie and going to work. I looked out the window where mist fell slowly on the street. I paced into the living room and back, trying not to look at my son. He ignored me. I could hear him munching cereal and rustling paper. There was a picture, or a memory, real or imagined, that I couldn't get out of my mind. Last spring, before the accident, my wife was sitting in the chair where now my son always sits. She was reading the paper to see how the Blackhawks did the night before, and her sleek mussed hair was only slightly longer and darker than the hair of my son's wig. I wondered if my son had a similar picture in his head, or if he had a picture at all. I watched him, and he finally looked up at me, but his face was blank. He went back to his reading. I walked around the table, picked him up, and held him against my chest. I pressed my nose into that wig, and it smelled not like the clean shampoo scent I might have been hoping for, but like old lettuce. I suppose it didn't matter at that point. My son put his smooth arms around my neck, and for maybe a few seconds we were together again, the three of us. That always brings goosebumps to my arms. Can you verify the goosebumps? Good writing makes my flesh goosey in a good way. And I love this story. It's such a simple little story. So let's apply our 3 Ps. For the people,
Man and his son.
man and his son, unnamed narrator, an I, first person narrator, and his son also unnamed, as well as the sort of ghost of a mother, wife figure. Place, kitchen, pace into the living room, goes back mainly to the kitchen and back to the kitchen table. What city are they in? There's one hint. Chicago, because of the Blackhawks, yeah. Now, what is the problem in that story? The problem is, what I see is often missing from new writers' work. It's also kind of hard to find what it is. The story makes me have chill bumps, but I have to think about what the problem is in the story. So what is the problem in this tiny story?
Dealing with the death of his wife.
Yeah, the wife's, dealing with the death of his wife. Now, this is what's called a short story, flash fiction. It's fiction that happens really quickly. And often the short stories that happen this quickly, don't really have everything. They're more about a mood or a turn, or almost a punchline than they are about an actual story with all its parts. This tiny story has all those parts, doesn't it? And the problem seems to be that the mother's not there, right? She's gone. And notice the backstory, right? What's the backstory in a piece of fiction? It's what happened before the current narrative that you need to know. What's the backstory? It's 3 perfect words before the accident. That's all the backstory you need, right? You don't need to know what kind of accident, when it was, or that kind of thing. What's wrong, what's happened is the mother is gone, dead, and these 2 are left. Now, what is their situation? How are they acting toward each other? Brady Bell doesn't tell us, he shows us. Show, don't tell is the great rule of fiction. What is their attitude to each other like?
Distant.
Distant. Yeah, the son is eating the cereal, and when the father says, we don't, where did you find in the trash, what does the son do?
Nothing.
Ignores him. Yeah. And what's the father's attitude like in the first sentence or 2? What's he trying to do? Ties tied. He's trying to get a respectable knot in his green paisley tie. Someone once suggested to me that maybe his wife tied his ties. I don't know, that's reading something into it that may not be there, but it's kind of a fun thought. Fun's the wrong word. But he's trying to get a respectable knot in that green paisley tie, right? So what's his attitude?
Frustration.
Frustrated, yeah. And he comes in and the son won't really look at him. He's wearing this wig. What's the wig a symptom of? You think?
Rebellion.
Sir?
Rebellion.
Rebellion, maybe so. The son seems surly, doesn't he? And why wouldn't he be? His mother's gone. Where does the son sit?
In his mother's chair.
Where the mother always used to sit. What does that tell you? Pardon me, what does that show you?
Want to be with her.
He misses his mother. The narrative could have said, my son really missed my wife since she was killed in the car accident. So much better it is having him sit in that chair where the mother used to always sit. That shows us. Show is more effective because the reader does some of the work, right? You can tell us, the readers, that he misses his mother, or you can show it. And show it is more important because it's active for us. What else about the story? What did you notice? What else did you notice about the story? So, just to say, the problem is that they're not communicating, right? They're not communicating because the mother's gone. She obviously was a piece of their trilogy, and now gone. How do they react? How do they get along with each other? Well, by him working too hard, apparently, and the son in his own world, digging around in the trash, putting a wig on, acting out in some ways, and ignoring his father, until here come the children again. The wig, and he picks his son up and hugs him, and for a moment, they're there, the 3 of them. It's beautiful. It's a great moment, isn't it? Now, what else about the story? I'm going to go on in a moment to sentimentality, but what else did you notice or like about the story?
He uses a couple of different senses. He talked about the crunching, the munching of the cereal, and then he also talked about wanting to smell the shampoo.
That's right. And that's actually a really good point. The wig smells, he says, not like the clean shampoo scent I might have been hoping for, but like what? Lettuce. What if it had smelled just like his wife? What if it had had her shampoo scent? The story would be blown. Why? Too sentimental. Perfect transition. See, I planned that. We know what sentimentality is in real life. What is sentimentality in fiction?
One thing, it's expected.
It's expected? What do you mean?
It's more like we wouldn't have expected any lettuce.
That's right. Yeah, it's something unexpected, yes. The expected is often more sentimental than the unexpected. Old lettuce really, puts it back in the garbage and makes it earthy, right? And that's good.
Very cliche, too.
Yes, sentimentality often it goes arm in arm with cliche. To me, sentimentality is easy, unearned emotion. It's emotion you haven't created. You just assume that you can have it. And what are sentimental tropes? Kids, children. We're always sentimental about kids. Puppies. Most people, I had a theater who wrote a story about a guy who was burning puppies in a fire. That's too unsentimental. You can't do that. People like puppies. Now, I've killed my share of dogs in my stories, but not throwing them in a fire. That's too much. So easy, unearned emotion. To me, the great sentimental TV show, and I still like it, is Little House on the Prairie. I actually went to William Gay's room last night, his hotel room, and drank some beers with him. We were talking about last time about Little House on the Prairie. He says, I was saying what a sentimental show is. He said, yeah, but the books aren't sentimental at all. And that's right. Those books are hard. those are hard realist books and beautifully written. But the show with Michael Landon, with the taped back ears, Michael Landon, just made it all sentimental. So every show, or the early ones anyway, I mean, after they let Mary go blind, I kind of quit watching. That was too hardcore for me. I want sentimentality from Little House on the Prairie. And the one I remember, every episode, something goes wrong with Half Pint, and Pa fixes it, right? The one I'm thinking about is there was a crippled girl who had one leg far shorter than the other, so she limped horribly. And she was Half Pint's friend for that one episode. They were Norwegian or something. And at one point, Half Pint said to Pa Ingalls, when she walked on a board, she walked fine. Just for lift of the board, she walked just like me. Here come the chills back. Pa Ingalls does what? He's handy. He builds her a shoe with a block on the bottom of it. And of course, the antagonist, you have a protagonist who's the hero, an antagonist who keeps the hero from getting what he or she wants. The protagonist is the little crippled girl's father, who doesn't want her to wear this thing made by this American guy. So he won't let her until they sneak it on her. And the last scene, or the scene I remember as being the last scene, is she's running in the yard saying, "Watch me play, Papa, watch me play." I almost cry thinking about it. "Watch me play, Papa." And she's running, and he's crying, and Pa Ingalls is crying, and Half Pint, and I'm crying, But it's cheap. Why is it cheap? Because this little girl isn't a real little girl. All she is a little girl with one leg too short for the other, put there to make us feel this swelling of emotion at the end of the episode. It's cheap. If she were a real little girl, it'd be a better show. And how do you make her real? Well, we're going to talk about that in a bit. I mean, about making characters real. I have, deeper in your handout, another story. Now this story, what we're going to do now is read two stories, okay? Two stories about orphans and Christmas, okay? One is going to be good, one is not going to be good. The bad story we're going to read first, and I found it a long time ago in an old magazine. I crossed the writer's name out at the end, so you can't see it. I would never make fun of anyone like that, but I'm going to. Now, the first page is hard to see. This came out of an old magazine, so you can't quite see those letters. I'll read them, okay? This is a very short story. It's called Red Christmas. Gustav Trudge. Oh, by the way, it's okay to laugh at the story, okay? If you start laughing, that's fine. Gustav trudged through knee-deep snow. There were no trees, only mounds of ice. No sun, only dark clouds that promised more snow. No life around him, only stark, barren wasteland. The only sound was the wind, screeching like an angry banshee, threatening to envelope him forever. But grim purpose kept it moving. Were it not for that, it would have dropped long ago, succumbing to the sleep that would be his doom. The man he sought was warm now, probably sitting in front of a fire in his cozy house to the north, while Gustav, condemned to a life of loneliness, would never be warm. The one he sought was undoubtedly with his family, making plans for the future. Gustav had no family, no future. Ice lined his pale beard and set his face. His breath was a wintry cloud that hung in front of him like a dense fog before dissipating and joining the death dance of the wind. The desire to stop, to plunge headlong into the bitter white tomb that surrounded him was great, but the laughing face that haunted him drove him on, and his hand felt for the reassuring weight of his pistol. By kidnapping this man, he would become infamous, be frozen into history, fulfill his destiny. The world would be his ransom. He was not happy, and now others would feel his wrath, his misery. Had he been able, he would have cried, wept for the emptiness he felt, for the family and friends he'd never had, and for what he was about to do. But the tears would not come, had never come. His heart was ice. That's terrible, y'all. I think they're grown or two by now. Behind dark snow goggles, his gray eyes narrowed. He inhaled with open mouth. The frigid air bit his throat and lungs, but he welcomed the pain. He was the Iceman. Then, through the snow and wind, he glimpsed a flickering light, and a cold smile cracked his lips. Now, he thought. But with his next step, the snow gave way beneath him. Briefly, he saw the sky as he flipped, and the glassy bank of the pit. As he hit solid ground, the breath left his body. He began to lose consciousness, thought he heard voices, reached for the pistol. Two tiny heads appeared over the rim of the frozen trap. We got him, Lige hooted. Lower your voice, Hinkle said. You'll wake him up. The boss was right, Lige whispered. Of course he was right. He's always right. Ain't you figured that out by now? Yeah, but how could he know everything? Don't ask dumb questions. Hinkle was watching their captive closely. You have to be careful with a character like this. What do you think, Lige whispered. What do you mean, what do I think? You won't shut up long enough to let me think. Lige grinned mischievously, pointed at the still form below. You want me to waste him? Hinkle glared at the rookie. Of course not. You gonna do it? Ain't nobody gonna waste nobody. Just call the boss and tell him we got the guy. Hinkle shook his head and watched the kid unstrap the portable radio, then lowered himself into the pit and searched their prisoner. When he removed the pistol, he scratched his chin. Then he found the ransom note. Would want to kidnap the boss, he wondered. Yo, Lige called. I got our orders. Well, Lige was rubbing the black hair under his stocking cap. You ain't going to believe this. When Gustav opened his eyes, he smelled coffee. He felt for his pistol, and when he did not find it, he sat up, spilling blankets from the bunk. He glanced around, rubbed his eyes, looked again. In a stone hearth, a well-tended fire popped and crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the room. The heat felt good on his face. Not until he slid out of the tiny bed did he notice a small fir tree standing in the corner, decorated with icicles and glistening balls, people. One of the packages under it, a straw basket covered by red and green paper, seemed to be moving. When he stood to examine it, he saw a card with his name on it. There was a strange tingling in his belly as he pulled the paper apart, and a spotted puppy emerged with bright eyes and wagging tail. The feeling rose to his throat. As he reached for the animal, it met his fingers with a warm tongue that sent chills up his arms. By the way, no chills on my arms. The dog was exactly like the one you got for Christmas 30 years ago. For Christmas, his parrots had disappeared in their plane. That's right. His chest heaved, and he caught his breath. Gustav took the puppy from his basket and stood. A glint of steel caught his eye. And he whirled to see his pistol resting on a table by the door. He walked over and stared. The ransom note lay there too. But before he could touch either, the door opened and a bearded man stepped in. Even in the darkness, there was something familiar about the round face. Glad to see you up, he said, pushing the door closed. He was shorter than Gustav and very plump, dressed in a red suit trimmed with thick, white fur. I was worried you might sleep through it. Through what? The man laughed softly. Christmas. Gustav took a step toward his host. Are you? The man lifted a cottony eyebrow. Then you know why I'm here, Gustav said, remembering the pistol and the ransom note. You're here to celebrate Christmas, the jolly host said, stroking his beard. We've got a lot to talk about, you and I, but first I have to leave for a while. The elves can keep you company. They're outside. Gustav wanted to speak, but dared not. So he simply watched as the fat little man placed a stocking cap on his snowy hair. With a quick wink, he then smiled and stepped out into the night. Gustav hurried to the window and watched them climb into his sleigh. The 8 reindeer danced and stomped until, at the command of their master, they began to move. Bells jingled throughout the forest, echoing from snowy hills and sleeping trees. As the merry procession rose from the ground, Gustav felt a single tear escape from the corner of his eye. He's the only one crying. He pressed his forehead against the window and watched the sleigh pull up and out over the treetops, watched until it was only a dark black dot against the golden moon. The ache in his chest felt wonderful. Without taking his eyes from the sky, he drew his puppy to his face and let it lick the warm tears. 3 words, oh my God. And I will tell you, I actually would never make fun of anyone's story. This is my first published story. Red Christmas, published in 1986 in Mobile Bay Monthly Magazine. I was in a short story class, and the editor came to talk to the class and said, if you guys have any stories, send them to me. I sent him 5. He hated all of them. He didn't like this one. But my story, I must say, to my credit, I had the guy going to kill Santa Claus. And he was going to get away with it. But the editor, Charles McNair, said, you know, who reads my magazine? I said, no, who? He said, rich, older, white women. And they don't want Santa Claus to be killed. Let's have you kidnap Santa Claus. I'm a whore. I said, yes, sir. I rewrote it right away. To order. And it's just a very, very, very bad story. The one thing I like about it is when it leaves his head against the window, but I stole that from somebody else. It's really nothing good. I mean, the Santa Claus is expected, even a puppy unearned at the end, and the tears. It's just a very bad story.
Cool. Hair standing on under in front of it.
You did?
Yeah.
You need to work on that. Your taste. I don't know my hair leave my arm.
The hairs in my nose stood up.
Mike Gustav, what is, I mean, that's a great name. I was pretending at that time I was listening to Gustav Mahler, so that's why I named him Gustav. And the elves, if you notice, their names are Lige and Hinkle. And they're redneck elves. Gets this guy, and then the North Pole. Just it's a story really to tear it apart and have fun tearing it apart. Any comments on that story? I'm not offended.
How old were you?
Far too old. I was born in '63, and that came out in '86. So was that 23? Ish. That's really. See, there's hope for all of you. There's hope for all of you. And it's a story that's bad from conception on. Sometimes a story at conception can't be good. I had a kid write a story once about a tequila bottle, that sang to him. And a genie was in it. I mean, I said, okay, if you were to write a story with a genie in a bottle, that's fine. But be aware it's a story with a genie in a bottle. And it's always going to be that. It'll never be realism. And, but anyway. So, I want to get that taste out of our mouth and read another story. It's the next story in your handout. This is by a writer named Marc Richard. Has anyone heard of Marc Richard? Amazing writer. His name is spelled Mark Richard, but it's pronounced, as he says in the French way, Richard. He's the author of a novel, Fish Boy, and 2 collections of short stories, The Ice at the Bottom of the World and Charity. And also recently a memoir called House of Prayer No. 2, which is amazing. It's a memoir in second person, you. It begins, it's something like, say you have a special child. And it begins in the mother's point of view, And he says, a special child in the South is anything from Down syndrome to dyslexia. And what Richard had, he actually had bad hips. And he's had 2 hip replacements as an adult. He spent much of his time in a children's hospital. And this memoir is about that. It's about how they nailed nails into his hips. It's wonderful and terrible. I recommend this book to you, and I recommend this writer to you. What's interesting, the story The Birds for Christmas is from his second collection called Charity. And there's a character named Michael Christian who appears in that memoir. So Michael Christian was a real person. He uses his real name, which is interesting. This story has a couple of bad words in it, and I apologize in advance for those, but I'm going to read it because it's in the story. And just as I read and as you follow along, see how he does not make a sentimental. And try to notice, we'll talk about how he does it after. It's called The Birds for Christmas. We wanted the birds for Christmas. You know what the birds, right? The Hitchcock film? If I ever do this with beginning fiction writers at Ole Miss, often they do not know what the birds is. I'd say, well, it's a movie, and describe the movie to them. We wanted the birds for Christmas. We had seen the commercials for it on the television donated third hand by the Merchant Seamen's in Sailor's Rest Home. A big black and white zenith of cracked plastic and no knobs. A dime stuck in the channel selector. You could adjust the picture, it had no sound, or hi-fi sound and no picture. We just wanted the picture. We wanted to see the birds. The old head nurse about to get our hopes up. It was a late show, after lights out, the night before Christmas Eve. She said it would wake the babies and scare She said it would wake the babies and scare the little boys down on the far end of the ward. Besides, she said, she didn't think it was the type of movie we should be seeing Christmas week. She said she was certain with Rudolph and Frosty on. That would be more appropriate for us to watch on the night before Christmas Eve. Fuck Frosty, Michael Christian said to me. I said, that 100 times. I want to see the birds, man. I want to see those birds get all up in the people's hair. That's a real Christmas TV to me. Michael Christian and I were some of the last big boys to be claimed for Christmas. We were certain someone would eventually come for us. We were not frightened yet. There were still some other big boys around. The big boy who ran away to a gas station every other night. The human skeleton who would bite you. And the guy locked away on the sun porch who the young doctors were taking apart, an arm and a leg at a time. The young doctors told Michael Christian that their Christmas gift to him would be that one day he would be able to do a split on stage like his idol, James Brown. There never seemed to be any doubt in Michael Christian's mind about that. For now, he just wanted to see the birds while he pretended to be James Brown in the hospital. Pretending to be James Brown in the hospital was not without its hazards for Michael Christian. He had to remember to keep his head lifted from his pillow so as not to bedhead his budding afro. Once when he was practicing his singing, the nurses rushed to his side, to his bed, asking him where it hurt. "I'm warming up, I feel good, stupid bitches," said Michael Christian. Then his bed was jerked from the wall and wheeled with great speed, pushed and pulled along by hissing nurses, jarring other bedsteads, Michael Christian's wrists hanging up over the safety bed rails like jailhouse window hands. He was on his way to spend a couple of solitary hours out in the long, dark, and empty hall, him rolling his eyes at me as he sped past saying, "Oh man, now I feel bad." Bedwilling into the hall was one of the few alternatives to corporal punishment the nurses had, most of them being reluctant to spank a child in traction for spitting an orange pip at his neighbor, or to beat a completely burned child for cursing. Bedwilling into the hall was especially effective at Christmas time, when it carried the possibility of missing Christmas programs. A veteran of several Christmases in the hospital and well acquainted with the grim Christmas programs, Michael Christian scoffed at the treasures handed out by the church and state charities, the aging fruit, the surplus ballpoint pens, the occasional batches of recycled toys that didn't work, the games and puzzles with missing pieces. Michael Christian's Christmas wish was as specific as mine. I wanted a miniature train set with batteries so I could lay out the track to run around on my bed over the covers. Not the big Lionel or the HO size. I wanted the section you see in magazines where they show you the actual size of the railroad engine as being no larger than a walnut. "You never get that, man," said Michael Christian. And he was right. James Brown in the hospital's Christmas wish was for the birds for Christmas. And as Michael Christian's friend, I became an accomplice in his desire. In that way, birds became a code, the way words can among boys. "Give me some birds," Michael Christian would squawk when the society ladies on their annual Christmas visit asked what we wanted. "How about a nice hairbrush?" the society lady said, laying one for white people at the foot of Michael Christian's bed. "I want a pick," Michael Christian told her. "A pick? A shovel and a pick? To dig with?" asked the society lady. "I think he wants a comb for his hair," I said, "for his afro." "That's right, a pick," said Michael Christian. "Tell this stupid white bitch something." "Squawk, squawk," he said, flapping his elbows like wings, as the nurses wheeled him out into the hall. "Give me some birds," he shouted. And when they asked me, I said to give me some birds, too. Michael Christian's boldness over the Christmas programs increased when Ben, the night porter, broke the television. Looking back, it may not be fair to say that Ben, the night porter, actually broke the television. But one evening it was soundlessly playing some kiddie Christmas show, and Ben was standing near it mopping up a spilt urinal can when the scream and hopes of Michael Christian's getting his Christmas wish blackened simultaneously. Apologetic at first, knowing what even a soundless television meant to children who had rarely seen any television at all, Ben then offered to burn up your butt, Michael Christian, leg braces and all. When Michael Christian hissed, "Stupid nigger," at Ben beneath the night nurse's hearing. It was a somber night, lights out. The next night, a priest and some students from the seminary came by. "Practice preachers," Michael Christian said. When one of the students read the Christmas story from the Bible, Michael Christian pretended to peck out his own eyes with pinched fingers. When the story was finished, Michael Christian said, "Now, you say the sheep herding guys were so afraid, right?" "Sore afraid," said the practice preacher. "The shepherds had never seen angels before, and they were sore afraid." "Now," said Michael Christian, "I'll tell you what, they saw these big white things flapping down, and they was big birds, man. I know birds, man. I know when you got bird problems, man. They were angels, said the young seminary student. No, said Michael Christian. They was big white birds. And the sheep herding guys were so afraid the big white birds were swooping down and getting all up in their hair and stuff. Squawk, squawk, he said, flapping around in his bed. Squawk, squawk, I answered. And two of the practiced preachers assisted the nurses and women, Michael Christian into the hall, and me into the linen cupboard. One night in the week before Christmas, a man named Sammy came to visit. He had been a patient as a child, and his boxed cleft palate and hair lip repairs were barely concealed by a weird line of blonde mustache. Sammy owned a hauling company now, and he showed up blistering drunk, wearing a ratty Santa suit, and began handing out black-strapped Timex Junior wristwatches. I still have mine somewhere. One by one, we told Sammy what we wanted for Christmas, even though we were not sure, because of the speech defect, that was what he was asking. Me, the Walnut Train. Michael Christian, the birds. We answered without enthusiasm, without hope. It was all by rote. By the end of the visit, Sammy was a blubbering, sentimental mess, reeking of alcohol and promises. Ben, the night porter, put him out. It was Christmas Eve week. The boy kept running away, finally ran away for good. Before he left, he snatched the dime from the channel selector on our broken TV. We all saw him do it, and we didn't care. We didn't even yell out to the night nurse so we could get a better head start than usual. It was Christmas Eve week, and Michael Christian lay listless in his bed. We watched the big boy ward empty. Somebody even came for one of the moaners, and the guy on the sun porch was sent upstairs for a final visit to the young doctors so they could finish taking him apart. On the night before Christmas Eve, Michael Christian and I heard street shoes clicking down the long corridor that led to where we lay. It was after lights out. We watched and waited and waited. It was just Sammy the Santa, except this time he was wearing a pale blue leisure suit. His hair was oiled back, and his hands, holding a red wrapped box, were clean. What we did not want for Christmas were wristwatches. What we did not want for Christmas were bars of soap. We did not want any more candy canes, bookmarks, ballpoint pens, or somebody else's last year's broken toy. For Christmas, we did not want plastic crosses, dot books, or fruit baskets. No more handshakes, head pats, or storybook time. It was the night before Christmas Eve, and Michael Christian had not mentioned the birds in days, and I'd given up on the Walnut Train. We did not want any more Christmas wishes. Sammy spoke with the night nurse. We heard him plead that it was Christmas. She said, all right. And by her flashlight, she brought him to us. In the yellow spread of her weak batteries, we watched Michael Christian unwrap a portable television. There was nothing to be done except to plug the television into the wall. It was Christmas, Sammy coaxed the reluctant night nurse. They put the little TV on her chair, and we watched the end of an Andy Williams Christmas special. We watched the 11 o'clock news. Then the movie began. The Birds. It was Christmas, Sammy convinced the night nurse. The night nurse wheeled her chair away from the chart table and rolled it to the television set. The volume was low, so as not to disturb the damaged babies as the little boy entered the ward. Babies largely uncollected until after the holidays, if at all. Sammy sat on an empty bed. He patted it. Michael Christian and I watched The Birds. During the commercials, the night nurse checked the hall for the supervisor. Sammy helped return any infant that cried out. The night nurse let Sammy have some extra pillows. Michael Christian spoke to me only once during the entire movie. Quietly, during a commercial, when we were alone, he said, "Those birds messing them people up." When the movie was over, it was the first hours of Christmas Eve. The night nurse woke Sammy and led him out to the sun porch. She told us to go to sleep and rolled her chair back to her chart table. In the emptiness, you could hear the metal charts click and scratch, her folds of white starch rustle. Through a hole in the pony blanket I pulled over my head, I could see Michael Christian's bed. His precious afro head was buried deep beneath his pillow. At the dark end of the ward, a baby cried in its sleep, and then was still. It was Christmas Eve, and we were sore afraid. Well, verify. So if you told me that he was going to write a story about orphans, sentimental. Crippled orphans, no chance, sentimental. Crippled orphans in a hospital, at Christmas, for heaven's sake. There's no way this story could not be sentimental, and yet it's not sentimental. My chills were real, and I hope you had them too. Did you like the story? I think it's an amazing story. He also told me about the story. He said he went to bed one night, and the idea came to him in a flash. He almost went to sleep. He said he said, "I hauled my big ass out of bed," that's a quote, and sat down and wrote the story in a quick draft. He said it often happens that way. You have to get out of bed if you're a writer. You can't stay in bed, or this story might not have existed. And he was there in his place, and he, a guy named Michael Christian. And Ben the Night Porter is also in that memoir as well. So it's kind of shocking to me that how real this really is. So, how does he avoid being sentimental?
He focuses on other things, the sentimental aspects of it, the orphan aspect of it, the crippled aspect of it is in the background, it's not where the focus is.
Yes,
He uses the problem, the conflict for the story.
I'm sorry.
He uses the problem in order not to, you make sure that the problem is bigger than, how it's already set up.
Yeah, and right away we know what they want, don't we? Every character must want something, even if it's only a glass of water. They want to see it's in the first line. We wanted to see the birds. It's very clear that way. It's direct that way. Except it kind of isn't. What do they really want? At the end of the story, when they're sore afraid, what have they, what has happened? And what do they really want? Yes, sir.
Someone to take them home.
Absolutely. What they're afraid of is being left at this orphanage, at this hospital over Christmas, and their parents not coming to get them. Some have parents, some don't. Michael Christian's been there a long time. We know that about him. How? He didn't say Michael Christian had been there a long time. How does he show us he's been there for a while?
Seen a lot of Christmas programs,
Yeah.
year after year.
He's well acquainted with the grand Christmas program. And he says, and our narrator is also unnamed, as in the wig, wants a little train. And what does Michael Christian say? You never get that. And also, let's talk about for a moment, in terms of the story, the idea of perspective in fiction. We often have I narrators, first-person narrators, and really telling our story. Something important to think of, when you're doing an I narrator or first person, is when is the story being told? The story they're telling, this one takes place, in a hospital one Christmas. But when is the adult narrator telling us the story? It's past tense, so it happened at least yesterday, right? But we know it's longer. There are two lines that give you hints to time having passed. Did you notice those? Yeah, time history and wristwatch. I still have mine somewhere. Why does he still have it somewhere?
Same place. He was at the same place.
Yes, Samuel was there too. And the present Samuel gave him is the one he still has. He still had, what does that show you?
That's something.
Time.
It meant something to you, yeah. And Sammy has been a patient there, not Sammy, Sammy, has been a patient there, and knew to give real presents. Although they didn't want he says they didn't want any wristwatches. What they wanted was the birds, of course. At the end they say, what they really wanted was to be taken away, taken out, rescued for Christmas, and also to not be crippled. It's what they really want. So, I've totally gone blank up here. I do this a lot, by the way. It's out of my mind. And when I'm with the kids, it's okay, because they don't notice. They don't listen anyway. But when I'm in front of 25 people, what's the other line of perspective?
The blue leisure suit.
Same as wearing the pale blue leisure suit.
That puts it back in a particular.
Oh. Now, that places it in terms of the time period. I'm talking about, how do we know that time has passed between when the narrator is telling us the story and the story occurred? I think it's about that walnut train. You never get that. Michael Christian said, and he was right. So, he wouldn't have known he's not going to get it. Maybe he would have gotten it that Christmas, but he didn't, and never got it. Christmas after Christmas. And this kid, we know from that memoir, has been in this hospital more than once. So, we know what they want. They want to watch the birds, ostensibly, but they really want to be claimed. They really want to get out of that hospital, of course. And But let's get back to, to sentimental. What are Michael Christian's first words? Buck Frost. That gets rid of any, as I think, the introduction. This came out of an anthology. Y'all know the anthology New Stories from the South, published by Algonquin Books once a year. It's a great anthology of Southern literature. This was in the best of the first 10 years, best of the decade. And I went to a big party where all the writers were there, and I had Mark Richard, had everyone sign the book for my new fiance, Beth Ann, and he wrote, to Beth Ann, 3 magic words of marriage. You're right, dear. That's been good advice. I've always done that. You can't say dear and roll your eyes. You can't say, you're right, dear. That doesn't work. I say earnestly. But this little introduction says, any sign of Dickensian sentimentality is ripped away with Buck Frost. You're not in line for a typical Christmas story. Right? But the story even has a Santa Claus, right? My story, Red Christmas, has a Santa Claus. And someone described my Santa Claus.
Snowy
That's
white.
kind. That's kind. Say traditional is kindness. Yeah, cliche, I would say. Snowy eyebrows. I think he winks. Blah blah blah. He did all that in that poem, The Night Before Christmas. That's good. That was original and fresh. It was also about 120 years ago. I should know better by now. My Santa Claus is a cliche. He does nothing unexpected. He is not fresh. Now, who's Richard's Santa Claus?
Leisure Suit Larry.
Pale blue leisure suit Sammy the Santa, who owns a hauling company now.
And he's drunk.
He's a blubbering, sentimental mess, reeking of alcohol and promises. That's beautiful. This is before Bad Santa, by the way. So Richard is quite original. So the Santa Claus is not what you expect. The characters are real. They say things like Buck Frosty, and they're funny. That helps. Humor always helps. When we laughed at my story, it was for the wrong reasons. We're laughing at the writing, not with the writing, weren't we? I was, anyway. I thought y'all would have laughed more. Such a terrible story. His Santa is so totally fresh. It's just, it's wonderful. And also you notice, what's good about the story is you feel that the narrator knows his stuff, don't you? Who would have thought about, being bed-wheeled into the hall as punishment? That's, you don't have to be there to do that. And the best writers, have either been there or imagined it better than the rest of us. So I really think that, it's quite an amazing story for that reason. And then the people who come in, we have, I think, 3 different sets. We have the society ladies. And what do they give Michael Christian? A brush. And these are the rich white ladies, okay? Doesn't that have a clue? The brushes are going to work. Now, we're also never told Michael Christian is black, are we? We pick it up because he doesn't want to bedhead his afro. That's a beautiful move on Richard's part. You realize he's black, but without being told, you accept it into the story. It's sort of in the current of the story. And also at the end, we're not told they're afraid, are we? We're shown it. What's the narrator doing?
The whole one is.
Michael Christian is hidden. He's got his head covered up at the risk of his afro. It's so important to him at the beginning of the story. At the end of the story, it's not important at all. What's important is he's terrified. And of the birds, yes, but also of the future. And the society ladies, he says, I want to pick. And what does she say in response? A pick. In alarm, a shovel and a pick to dig with? As if he'll dig out of his jail and get to her. Dig out of the hospital and get to her. And even when he's wheeled away, what's the great analogy? His hands like what? Jailhouse window hands. That's so good. It's this. The hands you see, and they're always black, out the windows of jailhouse, right? In the olden days. It's just beautiful, because that's probably where Michael Christian's going to go with this guy. This is what he's got. He's got leg braces, and he's got people pushing him in the hall, but he's really smart. So we hope he maybe will go far. So the practice, and then the practice preachers come next, right? And they're even worse. They even help push the narrator into the hall. And they're so tied to their Christmas story. They can't see that this incredibly interesting kid is worth listening to. He's smarter than any of them. Michael Christian is. And they don't see it. That's what being dumb is. That's what being stupid is. You don't see who's smarter than you are. And finally, the third person to come is, of course, Sandy, who comes back and brings them a red wrap box and this portable television, and they get to see the birds. They get what they want. And of course, when you get what you want, it's never what you think it will be. So, two stories, one dripping with sentimentality, one without entirely. And we'll see which one's better and we'll see why. Questions about, sentimentality in fiction or other things, the people, place, character, content, questions about shit or situations. Well, that was funny, come on. Just cursing is funny, isn't it? Just saying shit, people laugh. Here, yes, sir.
I've just got a question about the one that you wrote. Was it irrevocably sentimental from the start, or was there anything you could have done to make it unsentimental by the way you wrote it?
I planned on splattering Santa Claus across the wall. I think that would have saved that story. That would have been fresh. It would have been original. And maybe he would have died in a bad way. I don't know but actually, I don't. Honestly, the truth, I don't remember what happened in the story. I don't remember, but I remember him saying, "We can't kill Santa Claus. We have to. Let's just, he said, my audience doesn't want that. Let's have him kidnap Santa Claus. I paid $100 for this. I was happy to do it." And but I don't know, if you could write, I suppose, a certain kind of hardcore story where someone goes and kills Santa Claus, and it would exist as a story where someone goes and kills Santa Claus. I can't imagine it would be very good. So I don't know. I think my story was a failure from conception. To have Santa Claus be the real Santa Claus, and that. I don't know. It's a good question. I haven't thought about that. I don't know how. Except through really graphic violence, I could save that story. And I think it's better thing to teach with now anyway. I think it exists for this reason, to show people what not to do. Yes, sir.
I guess I look at that story with the two boys, and at the beginning and at the end, they're in the same place with the same problems. But so I don't know if getting away from sentimentality or getting more edgy and real. Is that a technique to use? Whereas at the beginning of your story, your characters got problems. At the end, they've still got problems. But you're just feeding just little bits of hope or little bits of, you know what I'm saying? If the assassin now has a puppy and is warm and fuzzy, he's in a totally different place, And that just I guess. More real is you don't have a month or a day where you go from being completely depressed to completely fulfilled now.
Right. Yeah. He goes from being absolutely destroyed. His family was disappeared 30 years ago. He's a ruined person. He's frozen. His heart's frozen. All that ridiculous ice imagery, and he goes and his heart melts. I think he even says that, or it implies his heart melts. It's like the Grinch. The Grinch is so much better. By the way, the Grinch is beautiful because it sets up its problem in the first sentence. Every who down in Whoville likes Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived more than Whoville, did not. Right? Problem. He wants to get rid of Christmas. He doesn't like it, and they want it. It's beautiful. And I think with the Richard story, we're dealing with real people, and even a real setting. My setting is the North Pole. The setting is interesting, strange. Most of us have been in a children's hospital, especially at Christmas, right? It's a fresh setting. I think the word is fresh. Keep it fresh, and you will avoid sentimentality. And also, just have your characters be real people. I've got a guy named Gustav, who's an assassin. From Gustav, the first word is fake. If his name was Charles, be a better story. Charles, not trudged. What an overused, overwritten word. Charles struggled. Struggle may not be better. Charles pushed through the snow. I don't know. I'm not going to write the story again. But talking about changes, and what we do want is a character, by the end of the story, to have changed in some way, or for the reader to register the change, the character might not register. I think by the end of the story, those two kids have grown up. I mean, they've gone from so afraid to sore afraid. You know, I mean, they've gone from being, you know, from wanting the birds to wanting something far bigger and, you know, more unattainable. You know, I think that story does everything that a story can do. It's been a good question.
I was just going to sort of make an observation. It's interesting that we're talking about a bad story and a good story, I guess, maybe to use your words. And what's interesting is that I think if we were having this conference about 50 years ago, I'm not sure we would be saying the same, those adjectives, applying those to these two stories. Because, you know, when you think about it, I'm not a writer. I teach theater, but certainly in plays, but I think also in fiction, you know, melodrama was king then. And so that inherently involved sentimentality
Yeah.
at the end, you know, in between two, but certainly at the end. And so, you know, it's just interesting that our culture and our perspective and what we want from art now has really changed. And so this is the second story that we're reading now. This is what, you know, writers want, and this is what contemporary readers want. And so it'll be interesting, of course, I'm sure in 50 years to see where we go from there. But really, you know, I think your story might have been received very differently to the majority 50 years ago, maybe. You know?
I think you're kind for saying that. Sure. But I agree with you. I do think we're getting, you know, collectively smarter. But tennis practice are getting better, you know. Remember the wooden rackets that John McEnroe played with, and Jimmy Connors? These awful wooden rackets. If you've ever tried to play them, it's impossible. It's like you being armed with a stick, and then someone has one of these tennis rackets. They have a whole sword. They have a sword. These things are getting better and better. And also, writing skills are getting better and better. I think as a culture, you know, we expect more now. And it's been done before. Which is why none of us should write dialect for the most part, because it's been done to death by, you know, Mark Twain and others. And dialect is hard to read. And I think it's distracting more than it contributes to a piece of writing.
Or you'd have to do it in a fresh way, because I thought the Help pretty much nailed it.
That I haven't read. I got to read The Help.
Yeah.
I need to read it. It's in every airport. I'm kind of offended it's in every airport. That's why I'm refusing to read it. No, it's a book. It's on both Beth Ann's and my radar. I really want to read that because I've heard, you know, she does something daring. And
Yeah, I mean, the dialect was what I thought was really.
Was it good?
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. Well, see, think about dialect. You know, actually, a little bit goes a long way. My grandmother says not ruin. She never said ruin. R-U-I-N. She said burn. R-U-R-N. And I always have my hair say, you know, you'll learn that. You know, and I love that. So I do that once in a while. A little bit goes a long way. And so I'm, you know, so the dialect is one more reason for me to read that book because I'm really interested in people who are doing it now and doing it well. But she wrote, you know, as a white woman from a black woman's point of view, even and as an I, which is a very, you know, bold thing to do. I mean, in Crooked Letter, my last book, I have a black character, but he's third person. You know, I'm over his shoulder with my camera, and I'm in his head, but I'm not speaking for him. I would have been afraid to do that. I would never have done that. Yes, sir.
I wonder if you just please make some comments about the publishing and getting your work published and what's been your experience and how that has changed over the years.
No, actually, you know, I published my first book in 1999, sold it in 98, so I've been doing this for, you know, quite a long time. My beard's gotten gray since I sold my first book. I mean, so a lot of time's passed. So I've seen the market change in invariably bad ways. The first way is it's harder and harder and harder each year to get published. You know, I published my stories in 99, and I have another collection of stories almost ready, and my agent said to me, we should publish that as a book. Said, this Crooked Letter did better than my other books, so if the next book is a collection of short stories, the buyers, the Barnes & Noble buyers, will buy a much smaller volume of it. So I'm not even sure I'll be able to publish another collection of short stories. You know, so I mean, in the market dictated that. I've got stories that I like and I want to publish, and they have a theme. They're all about parents and kids. They're a strongly thematic collection. So every year it's harder and harder to publish fiction, and harder to publish short stories. Also, the turnover for editors is terrible. I've had, and publishers, you know, I've had 2 publishers fired in my number of years. I'm on my 3rd editor, And, you know, and I see people get fired left and right. It's awful. So it seems bleak, but yet it's also hopeful because great books still keep being published. You know, they keep coming somewhere. And even collections of stories keep coming. One called a great one, I can't think of the name of it now, but published fairly recently. They still do keep coming. But yes.
I make this statement and get your comment on it. It seemed like to me that more and more of the publishing world is getting schizophrenic. You hear them say, we want this new voice, something fresh, and blah, blah, blah. And then when they really get down to it, you're given all these parameters that are formulaic. This has to be so many words, yada, yada, you know, let's have a real cute opening line. Was it the best of times or worst of times? It can't be both. You know, things like that. And so it just seems to be that there's huge mixed signals coming out of editors and publishing along those lines.
I don't deny that. I mean, you know, every editor has his or her own taste, and you know, I think it's schizophrenic also now because there's all this electronic publishing coming in. Everyone's trying to figure out how to get paid for that, and that's a big mess. But you know, but you do get conflicting opinions. I mean, I teach in an MFA program, and I feel so bad for the students when I say one thing about the story, and someone else says something else entirely different, even contradictory to what I say. You know, the writer has to do what the writer wants to do and fix it themselves. And as far as, you know, the next big thing, people will know it when they see it. You know, they'll know it when they see it. There can't be any more Vietnam books. My agent was trying to sell a Vietnam novel called The Lotus Eaters, and he could not sell it. You know, 40 publishers turned it down, from the highest to the biggest to the smallest. Said no more Vietnam novel. Then that book comes out. It's called Matterhorn. It's a huge book. You know, they said no fat books. This thing's huge. They also cut it in half. They published by half of it. I mean, they really edited it down. When that happened, my agent called this one back, and she said, I can't sell your book. He took it back and then sold it because Vietnam books are suddenly back in vogue because of Matterhorn. So publishing is always all about timing. You know, it's, you know, Crooked Letter did well, I think, because it was at the right time for electronic publishing. It's a lot of, you know, MP3 book editions and Kindle editions. It was just lucky for me at that time. It's, you know, some huge number. More than all my other books combined have sold. This one sold electronically. It's crazy. So schizophrenic probably, and probably getting worse. But I'm still hopeful. I still see great books coming out of New York and other places. And I honestly do believe that the best will rise. It may take a long time. You know, William Gay, who was at this conference, wrote for 30 years before publishing a word. Do y'all know this? It's amazing. His story is, I can, William Gay for a minute. I love this man deeply. I love William Gay. Whenever I'm with him, it's just something that surprises me. Every time. You know, he wrote, this also goes back to your question, sir, about publishing. He had sent novels to agents before. He had been trying. He had not just been writing, he'd been trying to get published for a long time. In fact, one agent lost a novel of his. This is before Xerox machines. He sent his only copy, and it's now gone. It just breaks my heart that there's a novel, but even an early novel would have something for us to, enjoy. But anyway, I can tell you William stories all day. He once wrote a novel as a kid and had no money for ink. Crushed walnut shells, mixed them in water, and wrote a novel that way. It took him 30 years to get published, and he finally sold 2 short stories to small literary journals, the Missouri Review and the Georgia Review. And agents saw one of them and contacted him, which is getting back to what you were saying. In terms of a way to get published is to publish in the literary quarterlies. Your Georgia Reviews, your Texas Reviews, Carolina Quarterly. There are something like 500 literary magazines in this country, and agents read those. My agent, Nat Sobel, reads them every month. He subscribes to over 100 of them. He found me by reading my story in a literary journal. So if you publish in those quarterlies, agents will see your work, and they will write you. I know 20 people who've gotten letters from agents because an agent saw their work in a magazine. That's a great way to get noticed. But what they'll say to you, what the editor or the agent will say to you, is this: do you have a novel? I can't sell short stories. That's what my agent said to me. He said, I can't sell stories, you have a novel. He did wind up selling my story, but I was lucky, and he's good. And the times were better. So get your work out there, and it has a much better chance of being published. That is the truth. I know another writer, in fact, I set up another writer who I saw a story of his that I really loved, and I called Nat and said, read this story. Nat read the story, liked it, my agent did, and then the guy now has 2 books out. You know, publishing in good places, and you will be noticed that, you know, the cream rises as the food does. Yeah, you had a question, I'm sorry.
Kind of 2 parts, because what you were saying made me think of something else also. If you publish part of a novel, just as a segment, as a short story, are you then able to, if they say, has this been published before, turned in for publication, or does that cause a problem as far as getting the actual novel itself published? Are
No.
there rules?
Did I hear this question? Okay. It actually would help the novel. You know, often you see in, you know, the acknowledgement pages of a novel, you see, you know, previously, part of it's previously published in Esquire or wherever. Yeah, it's fine. You know, if they gets it out, they gets word out, gets buzz started. No, I think it's great to publish parts of a novel. You know, and one way to cheat is to write linked short stories that are connected to other short stories, you know, by characters or setting or themes or all the above. And a great example of this is a book called Music of the Swamp. Everybody read this? Oh boy, I'm here for you today. 4 words, Music of the Swamp. Write it down, please. It's not Kevin Costner and Will Durant. Write it down. It's an amazing book. It's the saddest and funniest book you'll ever read. You will be guilty about your laughter. You won't believe your laughter is hard and stuff. And the writing is just drop dead gorgeous. And when it was first published in maybe 92 or 3 or something like that, I think, back in the early 90s. It came out as a hardback from Algonquin Books. It just said Music of the Swamp, Lewis Norton, Nordan. Didn't say what it was. Didn't say it was a novel or a collection. It's a collection of stories, but they're all about the same person and set in the same place, Itabena, Mississippi. And it got reviewed as a novel. So when they published a paperback, it said Music of the Swamp, a novel. But it's not a novel. It's a collection of stories. Every one stands perfectly by itself. Together they add up to more than the sum of their parts. But still, it's, you know, and there's a progression. I would argue it's a collection of stories, but it's a linked collection. So that would help you in terms of that.
The other question, how much, is there a difference that you make between electronic publishings? I know some of the books now are available on Kindle or you can download them and things like that. Do you make less as an author when they do that with your book, or?
I don't actually know. I never read contracts. I just trust my agent. I trust my agent completely. We have a handshake deal. We didn't sign a contract, so I just trust that he'll do the right thing. But I know that, you know, they're going $9.90, $10 for a Kindle book, $10 on Kindle. Well, there's no shipping charge, and there's no production charges. So I think we probably will get about the same ultimately, which isn't very much. This is that truth.
You mentioned the short story, and Gino Diaz did that too, I believe. And
Around, yeah.
before he got to the Oscar Wilde. But and as far as you know, I've been writing for a long time, and I think when you look at sort of getting published and making money off your writing, there are things out there that make money that aren't what we would consider timeless writing. So, I mean, the perspective I've sort of taken is, you know, I'm not going to go to a culinary school to learn to make a Big Mac, even though it sells billions, you know, of product. You know, we go to learn how to make fine food. And, you know, for several years, I was real, you know, I have to get published. I have to see if I can make money at this. And then yeah, I think it took away from my writing. And then if you just sit back and say, I'm going to become the best writer I can, and luckily it's a profession that as long as your brain's good, you can keep doing it. Unlike a lot of things that I think my writing sort of flourished that way because then you are writing something that's personal to you, it's going to be better. And in 5 years, that may be something that's really hip and that hits, and you find somebody to relate to your work. But if you try to please this market this year, or the person that, you know, and you get away from who you are, I think that might stunt your growth.
Yeah.
That's just my perspective, and it's helped me sort of be at ease more with
I absolutely agree with
rejection or
It took
whatever.
Cormac McCarthy a long, 5 books to get noticed by anybody. You know, professors were reading it. I took a lot of free courses in 1993. No one knew who he was except for, you know, writers and teachers, pretty much, and a few freaks. You know, and William Gay found Cormac McCarthy on a paperback spinning rack. He found Outer Darker or something, bought it. This guy lives in Tennessee. He called, they became friends over the phone for a long time. But I agree with you. You know, and one of those Kurt Vonnegut rules is, you know, write for just one person, he says. And he wrote for his sister, oddly enough. I say write for yourself, you know. But it really is, if you're not revising, you're not gonna publish. Writing is revising. This is the hardest thing that I figure out. And actually, I hate writing the first draft. I hate the empty screen. I hate it more than anything. I love having something that I've written down that I can make better. And great advice is that I've discovered the hard way for a novel or a short story. Get to the end, even if the what you've written is terrible, even if it's a line of garbage a mile long. If you get to the end, you've got something, you can see the whole thing. You go back and fix it then. You know, I'm writing my fourth novel now, and I'm not doing that really, but I know it's what I should do. I know this is good advice. Right to the end.
And you've been teaching for how long with creative writing?
About 10 years.
Can you can you identify, say, just I'm sort of picturing an athlete, like can you picture raw talent when you see it writing, or do you think that like it can't be there and then 2 years later at the end of a program you see somebody's working like, oh my gosh, it was there, I would have never thought he would have been that good. Like how much can be learned and how much is just there, do you think? Is it 50-50?
Well, what I think is that talent can't be taught. You have it or you don't. And that's the hard fact about talent. You know, you either have it or you don't. Some people are natural writers. It flows out. And they're good from the beginning. Ann Tyler, in her early 20s, was publishing novels. So was John Irving. And they're just freaks, I'll call them. You know, I envy these freaks. You know, it took me a long time. I wrote 100 bad stories before I wrote a mediocre story. This is true. You know, but I think about Barry Hannah, who published right out of graduate school and was an amazing talent. Barry Hannah has the most poetic sentences of all. Here are two of my favorite Barry Hannah sentences. He's talking about his wife, his ex-wife, who flies over his house in a plane. He teases him, I want to rip her arm off. I want to sleep in her uterus with my foot hanging out. The weird juxtaposition, the great imagery, the word uterus, he uses words in a really fresh way. He was doing that from the beginning. On the other hand, there's Larry Brown, also from Oxford, who was a fireman for 20 years and was in the Navy, who decided in his early 30s he wanted to write. He'd always been a reader, and so he began to teach himself to write. And he said he wrote about maybe 100 bad stories. He wrote one terrible novel about a marauding grizzly bear in Yellowstone. He had never been to Yellowstone. He had never seen a grizzly bear. He said it was 400 pages of sex and man-eating. Now, I'm sure he was not a natural writer. He's even said in an interview I've seen, and he's told me, he said, you would have to, if you saw that novel, you'd have to admit I had no talent. But he worked really hard, for 10 years, taught himself to write. And he worked his butt off, he really did. And he began to write what he knew. He began to write about firemen and characters around Oxford, Mississippi, where he lives, you know. And what I love about Larry Brown is in his last book, published posthumously, it's called The Miracle of Catfish. He has characters coming to Oxford where I live, and it's a great place to live. It has the best restaurants. His characters never eat at City Grocery. They eat at Chili's or Applebee's. You know why? Because the people he's writing about would eat at Chili's or Applebee's. They would never set foot in City Grocery. My parents wouldn't go in City Grocery. It's just too fancy for them. And Larry Brown knew his people. So he taught himself to write, and it's rarely gorgeous, but it's always clear. So I think that writing can't be taught, but it has to be learned. And what a teacher can do is, I think help you avoid pitfalls, help you craft things. And I told about this story last year. I'll tell it, and then I'll stop. I know I'm probably running at the end of my time. This is one of my favorite stories, and I told this last time, and I'll tell it again. I went to school at the University of Arkansas when I was 31. I spent the decade of my 20s working a series of great jobs for a writer. I ruined my back, my knees, my shoulder, but I got good material. I worked 4 years at a plant that made sandblasting grit, mostly at night. I worked 4 years at a plant cleaning up hazardous waste. I worked 1.5 years in a hospital, a lot of it in the morgue. I worked in warehouses, gas stations. I worked with my hands. I met cool people. And then I decided, okay, that's enough of this. I'm tired of being cold. I want to be a writer. So I went to an MFA program at the University of Arkansas. And I've been studying writing those 10 years as well. I take writing classes at night or during the day. Whenever I wasn't working, I was in writing classes. I didn't drink in those days, had no girlfriend, so I had a lot more time. So I would work 80 hours a week and take 5 classes. I did that for a number of quarters in a row. But, I know this brain freeze. I have a point. I remind me, geez.
You went to Arkansas.
Yes, I went to Arkansas. Thank you, Jan. I've been at taking classes at South Alabama, and that teacher told me there that 12 pages of gorgeous lyrical prose is a short story. I thought, okay, I could do lyricism, and I had a flair for, I like to write, like he pushed him along a long hall, along a long hall, and there were by a dead live oak, clever stuff. I had lots of that. And I went to Arkansas, and said a workshop one day, fiction workshop. 12 pages of gorgeous prose is a short story. And the teacher said, oh, hell no, it's not. And I turned to my short story Poachers, which is in my first book. It's a story about 3 young guys who raise themselves on the land. And, they just trap, and they don't go to school, they can't read, they don't really even talk very much. They communicate silently to each other, because they're always in the woods hunting and fishing and trapping. And some stupid new game warden comes, and he tries to arrest them. Or something stupid like, having no life jackets on their boat, their guns loaded, no fishing license, whatever. And he actually kills their dog, and they kill him. Which brings back into this part of Alabama, the game warden from hell, Frank David, who begins to exact the grisly revenge on each of these 3 brothers. And we had a workshop, and they tore it up. They hated the story in the workshop. And I had lunch after with the teacher and with Bill Harrison. And Bill wrote Rollerball, the James Caan version in the 1970s. And Bill's very much about plot. He said, okay, let's talk about your story. These 3 guys kill the game warden, and the other game warden comes back and kills them. I said, right. He said, why does the other guy come back? I said, I don't know. He said, think about it. I said, I don't know. He said, come on, think about it. I said, I don't know, Bill. He said, well, maybe the old guy who comes back was the young guy's teacher. That gives him a reason. And I said, Bill, that's brilliant. He said, it's called plot, shithead. That's what, and I need to learn that. I need to be reminded that, gorgeous prose isn't enough, that something has to happen. And one event leads to another event. It was a really important lesson for me. And also, I would write a story with 10 pages and 12 characters. And Bill would say, all 5 of these people can be one person. Give him all their good lines, and it's a much simpler, better story, more focused. So that kind of thing. Practical advice. And things like, good grief. Things like, don't end the story with a death. It's just cheap. It's an easy, quick way out, Begin a story with a death. It's much harder, more interesting. Okay, well, one more, or should we go? I've been here a long time. All right. Thank you all very much.